Please welcome this evening's guest moderator, Vice Chair of the Clinton Foundation, Chelsea Clinton, and tonight's guest, founder of Impossible, Lily Cole.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the Apple Store for hosting us this evening and everyone at Apple who's been tremendously supportive. I want to thank all of you for coming. And most of all, I want to thank Lily for being here and sharing something that otherwise would have been thought impossible, that she indeed has made possible. I hope that tonight will be a conversation and that you won't be too afraid to ask questions. But I will certainly exercise my prerogative as the moderator to get us started. So Lily, in the video you talked a little bit about how we're so accustomed to having to pay something to get something. Could you explain a little bit about kind of what a gift economy is and why you were so drawn to this idea?
So, the idea actually existed before I knew what the term gift economy was or meant. And the idea was just a very intuitive thing of, well, there's a way that I interact with my friends and there's a way that I interact with my family and sometimes with strangers, but very rarely, where we don't count a measure. Like I don't count the amount of hours I spend listening to my friend on the phone or like how many times I've helped them. There's just a natural understanding of that's the flow of the relationship and I get so much value from that. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we were able to open those possibilities and kind of widen the community that I had those experiences with? And then I discovered the gift economy as a concept. I was in my last year at university and actually I was an anthropologist who I was doing a play with at the time. I told her about this idea and she was like, well, you should read books on the gift economy because it's been written about by anthropologists a lot. And I read Marcel Mauss's book first, The Gift, and then several after that. And what I took from it in an academic sense as the kind of big difference with exchange paradigms, most obviously money, but there are many others, is based on reciprocity and return. So with the gift economy, I do something for you because I can, and because you have a need that I can meet, or a want or a wish that I can meet, not because I expect you to give me something directly back. But if you imagine that everybody is doing that, inevitably when I have a need or a wish or a want or a can or a desire, somebody else will do it for me. And so the reciprocity is there, but it's just broken down. And by breaking that down, by making it generalized, so to speak, you build relationships between the individuals. And the relationships, like the subtle kind of social bonds that are recognized to work in my experience of friendships or in the kind of academic context of gift economies, that to me is the really powerful part of this, which is the reason I'm doing it.
And where did the name Impossible come from?
It came from, it was partially inspired by my thesis, which is called Impossible Utopias, and was looking at the concept of utopia and arguing that it's actually really important to have what that idea represents, which, as I understand it, is possibility and is optimism and is a belief that at any given moment we all have the kind of power to see things differently, create things differently. And I'd talked about in my thesis the idea of possibility and impossibility and questioned how often we call things impossible, which actually aren't. It's like, how often do you overhear someone in a cafe say something's impossible? And if you really thought about it, like logically, you're like, well, that's not actually impossible. You just think it's impossible. And this spoke to any potential cynicism, and I'm sure there's lots, and I'm sure there'll be more, that the idea that we could do things for each other for non-transactional reasons without an obvious sense of return that was coming was utopian or was impossible. And I don't believe it is. I do believe it's possible. That's why we crossed the I'm out, and that was the play with the idea.
And so you must confront a lot of cynicism. I think anyone who is an entrepreneur confronts lots of cynicism because there is a strong bias towards inertia, and that sort of whatever is today will be tomorrow. So what do you say both to cynics, and then what do you say now to other people who are coming with their impossible ideas, asking you for advice?
I try not to really say much to cynics. I try to just do it, And quite extraordinarily, the only reason it's been done actually has been because of the gift economy, has been because I started talking to people about this idea, and over and over and over again, people would be like, oh, I love it, how can I help you? Like, I'll do this part, and I'll do this part, and I'll do this part. And I mean, I'm the only person from Impossible sitting on this stage, but there is a huge host of people, both like in our team now or in our advisors or external to that, who've been part of making this real, and it genuinely wouldn't exist without that the contribution of many people. And now it is actually live and real, and it hasn't proven anything dramatic, but it's got a community there who really have been incredibly receptive and incredibly positive and are starting to do things for each other for non-transactional reasons. So I hope and think it's kind of proving itself somewhat, and I think hopefully that's the loudest voice we can give to cynics.
The best repudiation. And what do you say to other young entrepreneurs who want to translate their imaginations into something real, tangible, whether it be kind of in the App Store or otherwise?
That anything pretty much is possible if you really like put your heart and your mind to something. I do believe that, and it takes a lot of work. Like, I'm not going to pretend this was like skipping down like a country lane, but if you really deeply believe in what you're doing, that moves mountains. And I'd also say cooperation is incredibly powerful and incredibly empowering. And so talking to people and finding people who align with your vision that want to work together with you on it is also very powerful.
You've already spoken, and we've talked a lot about the importance of partnerships and finding people with whom you share a common vision, a common purpose. How have you found the people who have helped you translate Impossible into what it is today and will continue to help it grow and flourish?
A little bit of luck, for sure. I mean, you have to just be lucky enough to meet the right people. Definitely openness. Like, I started out feeling quite closed about it and protective almost, and then realized how difficult it was to do, and realized I just have to like talk to anybody and everybody and invite everybody into this process. And then people just kind of naturally find their way or not, because inevitably there are some people who it doesn't speak to, and usually they float away from you in the process. And then there'll be other people who it really does speak to, and it rings the same bell in their soul that it rang in mine at the beginning, and they're still part of it. And hopefully there'll be many more of those as we kind of go on this journey.
One of the design choices that you made in Impossible was to create it as a social business. I think we are probably more aware of what a social business is and what its kind of covenant obligations are than many people may be. Could you talk a little bit about kind of what it means to be a social business and why you chose for Impossible to be a social business?
So yes, it's interesting to see it as a design choice, because I've never heard that phrase before, but it is in a way a choice I made in the whole process of conceptualizing how this would work. And so 2 years ago, I went to Davos. I was there with the British government doing a campaign pre-Olympics, and I met two men who became very influential on me in this project, Professor Mohammed Yunus and Jimmy Wales. And when I first met Jimmy Wales, founder of Wikipedia, got very excited because Wikipedia is one of the biggest known gift economies, and started talking to him. And the first question I asked him was, why did he make Wikipedia a non-profit? Because I had been kind of circling this thought process in my mind. Do I want to make this a non-profit? Do I want to make this a business? And I was attracted to both ideas. The reason I was attracted to the idea of business is because I see the power of business. I mean, I work in many other ways in businesses and with businesses, and I see them, they have a very powerful, if they're successful, voice on our planet, an effect on our planet. But I was attracted to the intention that I find in non-profit space, and I felt it would be inherently paradoxical and wrong if I became very rich off doing a project like this, or if any other kind of private individuals became rich off doing something of this nature. And so in exploring those ideas that day, somebody suggested to me, well, why don't you look at Yunus Social Business, Professor Mohammed Yunus's business model. Very simple idea, but he's codified a language around it, which is to run a business with a social mission and then invest 100% of the profit into that social mission or funding other social businesses. I met with him with very good fortune, and met him a few times that year, and he invited me out to Bangladesh. I went to Bangladesh with him for 5 days, and I remember I went by myself, and I was so busy trying to organize this whole thing, and I just had a feeling I should go. And then I ended up in, where I can't remember where we transitioned to Dubai or somewhere, in the airport, just being like, what am I doing? Why am I going to Bangladesh? I'm so busy. Am I crazy? And it was one of the most important trips I've made. It had a huge impact on me, studying the model, meeting both people involved in his social businesses there, also Grameen, the structures he's done previous, spending time with him and very smart people around him, talking about and just thinking about the implications of the idea, made me leave knowing that it was the right thing for me to do with Impossible. And 6 months later, we did a conversation with him and announced that we'd be, I think, we're the first British social business.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What has surprised you most about the Impossible journey thus far?
It's been like I'm sitting here right now, talking to you all. It's continually mad that I was just there 5 minutes ago watching the stream live and watching people who I don't know posting their wishes and seeing their wishes, and it's so human and insightful. And if I think I can help, I am one click away from being able to help. And hopefully if I don't, someone else will. I mean, watching that all kind of move and come together is magical in some way.
So it really is the wishing tree kind of in practice on a global scale.
Hopefully, yeah. I've been to the reason we did that tree, and that was in my old university. The thought process behind that was I was very taken by the trees in Tokyo. I don't know if you've ever been there, where you write your wish on the tree and then you hang it. And that tradition of wishing, and I just think wishing is such an old-fashioned and universal tradition. And usually there's not really, on a practical level, there's not like a next step to that. It's just kind of a communication, I guess, to the cosmos. And I thought, wouldn't it be so wonderful if you did that, and then we take the wishes, which we did from that tree down, and then we actually put them into a network that might actually fulfill some of them, and fulfill them through our own connections and our own power, and humanizes the possibility there. So yeah.
So do you have any sense of how many wishes are being fulfilled on Impossible? Do you have any sense of sort of when that connection is made and a wish is met, and then the gift economy kind of moves out of the ephemeral and very much into the kind of practical?
It's, I wish I had really specific numbers. We don't, because you can see.
You should wish for that on Impossible, and
There
someone
you go.
should build that
I wish.
algorithm for you. Maybe someone in this room tonight could do that for Lily. Brown, you're laughing. I think that maybe you just committed.
We can get somewhat of a sense, we can see when a wish has been turned into a thank you. So thanking is the currency as sorts on the network. I like the idea of an abundant currency that you can only ever earn. And that doesn't have any real value in the sense that you can't exchange your 5 thank yous for anything, but just shows the community what's happening and reflects goodwill. And so from looking at the thank yous, we know it's in the thousands now that the wishes have been realized and thanked upon. But a lot of the people I've connected with through the network also tell me stories of things happening that aren't charted in the literal thing of writing and wishing and thanking. They're just connections made, and then they have a conversation. And I think there's a lot more potentially happening than we'll ever actually really be able to quantify. But still, if someone wants to help with an algorithm, that's fine.
My grandmother always sort of enjoined our family to ever be practicing what she called the discipline of gratitude. And I think that's one of the reasons why I resonate so deeply with Impossible and all that you're doing.
It's actually last week I went to see Chelsea speak in South by Southwest, and it was very beautiful. Actually, you quoted your grandma a couple of times, and I thought of that time that you first told me that she talked about how important gratitude was as a discipline, and that really stayed with me too, because I do think it's such a powerful thing. I think it is really the currency in this, whether it's you creating a picture and sending it or not. The feeling of gratitude, the gratitude I have for the people I've touched through this process, is what kind of inspires me to keep doing it.
To continue. On an average day, do you have a sense of what people are wishing for on Impossible? Sort of what are the kind of the most sort of extreme, philosophical, hopeful, and what are just really the practical that people kind of could use in their daily lives to make them feel better or maybe to make their lives a little easier?
It's quite a mix. I don't look at every single one. I wish I could. It's quite exciting that they're coming in too fast now for me to watch. But I do continue to check in, and it's an interesting mix between sometimes ephemeral things. So like actually we just introduced a popular feed in the new update, and it's interesting to see on the popular feed. It's often quite generalized ideas that that a lot of people could relate to that they might not deliver upon. So you get wishes for the war in Ukraine to end, or somebody's ill cousin to get well, and things that nobody else in Impossible is potentially actually going to be able to deliver upon, but suggest kind of emotional communal feelings. And then you get very practical things. Learning languages has been quite common, skills sharing, mentoring. Here's something we pulled up just before we came out. I saw somebody last week had wished to get her garden weeded because she had 2 twins, and reading through the thread, that was delivered. That was a local neighbour offered to help. So you do get quite practical ones, and the hope with it is that as we get denser localised communities, the platform can hopefully serve more real life answerable wishes.
And what have you wished for on Impossible?
I wish to go to space, which is not a good example of how practical these should be, but I thought I'll just put it there. And actually then somebody offered to take me to space, so it's great. I also wished for tomorrow we're doing a party, everyone's welcome, to launch Impossible here again, and I invited people in the Impossible community, so if you want to come you have to download the app and answer my wish. I wish that people would come, and if they have anything they want to bring, which could just be themselves, to let me know. I wished for a bag a couple of weeks ago because mine broke in the airport, and luckily as I turned up at the house, the man I was staying with gave me a bag, so that was quite nice, and he's on Impossible, so I thanked him. So it's been a mixture of things. I wish to learn to cook, I wish to learn graffiti, I wish to meet a few people, and interestingly in all of those instances it wasn't at least those last few ones I just mentioned, they all are in the process of coming true or came true, and it wasn't necessarily that somebody said in direct response, oh, I can do that, like I can teach you to graffiti, for example. Nobody did that, but several people saw that and went, oh, I know somebody who can teach you. And so what it meant was that by exposing that desire, exposed the fact that I wanted that. It opened up loads of opportunities. The same with meeting somebody, and I think that's really interesting because I've noticed a girl I know not very well, but I know in San Francisco. I saw one of her wishes. She'd never communicated that to me, and it was something I could very easily help with. And I think just allowing people to offer information they might not normally feel comfortable putting out there creates a lot more possibility.
So what wishes does Impossible think are unacceptable? What wishes do you take down?
Good question. It's a really tricky thing with taking wishes down because I hate the idea of censorship, so it's a kind of very, very fine line. But we obviously take down anything that's offensive, illegal, and also monetary content, and try to discourage it because it could be so easy to become another. There are plenty of websites that you can post things to do with money and sell things, and that's fine. But it's can we create a space that's not the prerogative? And I think we have to be quite protective about that. What we've done is we've put flagging tools, and I'm hopeful that our community will become more and more proactive at managing it itself by kind of self-policing. So if you see content you don't like, you can report it and say it's monetary or it's offensive, etc. And then once a few people do that, it automatically pulls down. And I think building decentralized ways that the community can self-moderate is really important.
Do we have questions from the audience? Otherwise, I can just keep going.
Do you ever see the organization growing to be able to fulfill wishes that aren't being met? And if so, what type of partnerships do you dream or wish, I guess I should say, that you want to work with to fulfill that?
What do you mean? Sorry, what kinds of wishes?
So like if wishes aren't being met, do you see the organization growing to a point to where you all can fulfill those wishes through various partnerships or people that you know that has those resources to do it?
Interesting question. Right now, it's very peer-to-peer, and I feel like that's an important environment to create, and because really the power is all from us. You know, it's the idea if we were all like us group of people right now, stuck. You know, imagine the doors get locked, like, and we're here for a month, and we've got to work it out together. You know, like we might need some help with food and water, but we probably have enough of everything, you know, of ourselves to make things happen. And so I've been trying to create an environment where people feel empowered without needing any kind of top-down ways of doing things. At the same time, I am actually very interested if we can build partnerships with different organisations and moving forward that might, and I don't know how exactly that will manifest yet because I need to spend some time thinking it through, but that might be able to fulfill wishes, as you suggested, which I think could be really interested, and then also might also have wishes that they could ask to the community. So there are obviously many NGOs and people who have real, you know, like they're kind of filtering real world needs that we might be an interesting partner for them to bring them resource.
So on both the supply and the demand side.
Yeah, potentially. I think it will take a bit of thought, but I'm very, very open-minded, and we're just beginning actually to get organisations approach us and ask us those questions. And I have a very open door policy to people approaching us and starting the conversation, because it's only really through conversation we can work out the best way to make that work.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I work with something called the International School of Self-Awareness. And what we've discovered through this is that dialogue, internal dialogue and external dialogue really are a key to development of relationships. How do we, through this type of medium, touch a demographic of people? Just briefly looking at Impossible, it seems it attracts quite naturally a young demographic. How do we reach out to a broader demographic? And how do we reach out to community? So how do we get that full group community to be really involved in this? Because it really seems like it could be highly beneficial to anybody who does that.
I think that will be, we have a community manager joining us in a few weeks in the team, and that's going to be a big part of her job, is how we can work with different existing communities and serve them, basically. I think in terms of demographic, we made a website on purpose, as well as the iPhone app, so that it would be hopefully accessible, and we tried to make it as simple as possible for people to use. Obviously, that can always be simplified, and we're on an iterative process of trying to make it easier and easier for people to use. My technical partner is really interested in SMS technology for the developing world. Like, we're thinking about all the different ways you can try and make it more accessible. At the same time, it is technology. You know, it will be limited to a certain audience. We're even actually building public. Like, we're taking the bodies of recycled ATMs and making them access points that could be public for seeing wishes and printing local wishes. So we're thinking about the different ways we can try and open the platform as much as possible to others, but inevitably there is always going to be a limitation on the basis that it is technology. But hopefully, I mean, the thing is really about the idea. You know, the thing is really about a cultural idea of how we understand our relationships to one another, and people can participate in that, and hopefully participate in that without using the app and using the website.
And I guess I would also say I would hope that young people would help democratize the idea to other generations. You know, certainly, like with my grandmother, my husband and I gave her an iPad for her 90th birthday. And she used it with such joy until she passed away a couple of years later, partly because she loved to garden. And she could no longer garden actively. She was too infirm in body, but her mind and her spirit were just as fierce as ever. So she could imagine what the garden would look like were she able to garden. And, you know, I think that is in many ways our responsibility for those of us who are technologically fluent, to help explain why it is such a special gift to be so to those who may be quite far from being digital natives.
And you can post on behalf of people as well. So you could post a wish on your behalf of your grandma. And one other thing on that question, we do actually have a 96-year-old woman on Impossible. We do actually have quite a few older users, which is lovely. Yeah, 96. Like,
That's great.
yeah, I love it.
That's great.
I follow her.
Understandably. Yes.
Hi, can you talk a bit more about the business model behind it and how you see Impossible growing?
Good question. So I have a much more pragmatic side of the team who makes me think about the business model. It was something I avoided for a long time, and I was like, yeah, but it just needs to work, and we'll grow users, and then we'll work that out. And there's still part of me that believes that, because I think there are ideas and opportunities that will manifest as the community grows and as it scales. But there's one specific idea we're exploring now, so that we can hopefully become at least self-sustainable in the next few years, which is looking at products and what the supply chains of products. So I have a kind of back history, which is related in a slightly confusing way, of looking at supply chains through working in fashion. And so I became very, very interested in the impact of the things we buy, socially, environmentally, because of the stories they have behind them. And I've always felt very frustrated by the fact that most of those stories are incredibly opaque. And even as a kind of well-intentioned consumer who wants to buy things that I know are empowering people by being made, I actually can very rarely do that, because it's usually so hard to know the stories behind objects. And so what we're looking at is building a structure that can make transparency more accessible to consumers and surface products on that on that pedestal.
Yes. In the front.
Thank you. Yeah, so it seems like the model relies a bit on those who fulfill the wishes, basically just doing it altruistically. Is there any idea about having hooks in there to appeal to things like status or individuals' desire for recognition of doing good deeds? I know altruism is a beautiful thing, but maybe you're leaving some unfulfilled wishes on the table by not using these other motivators.
So not just a good Samaritan, but the best Samaritan.
Yes.
Lily.
We do that a little bit. So the thank yous that you send are always public. You can't actually choose to make them non-public to kind of not even give people the option to be humble about it. And they're always on your profile. So when you look at another user's profile, you'll see the history of the thanks that they've received and sent. And the thinking with that is that we're not saying, like, in a kind of omnipotent way, because this person has loads of thank yous, you should therefore be nicer to them. But the community can see each other, like in the same way that potentially old school community could, you recognize the behavior of one another. And I believe that people are more generous to the people who are more generous. And that's why it works, because it iterates itself. So the thank yous try to mimic that idea and can be shared on other social networks, etc. And I think there's a very interesting analogy in my mind between social reputation that suggests and social reputation that you could potentially argue is in Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. And how social reputation is understood to be a big part of potluck and kind of gift economies in the past, that actually social reputation was a big part of other gift economies and kind of more old school practices. So yeah, I think I don't kind of fight that situation. Yeah.
Yes. In the back.
So my question is, have you found that people get a little creative with some of their answers, the people that are helping out other people? For instance, I wouldn't be able to send someone to Spain if they wanted to go, but I could take them to a Spanish restaurant and talk about my trip or something like that. But have you found that people have done the same? Have they gotten creative, and do you encourage that kind of thing?
Can you please join? Can you please join and be creative? I'm not like the oracle. I don't read every feed and see everything. I feel like people are creative, and that's what's part of beautiful about this process, is that you see people's personalities, you see their generosity, you see their humor, you see so much through it. And inevitably creativity ties into that. But I certainly think that you should sign up and be as creative as possible in your answers. We did have one actually yesterday when we posted about this event happening. Somebody I saw a tweet on Twitter that said, "I wish I could fly to New York to be there." And then Impossible, who's handled by one of our colleagues in Europe, I loved watching this dialogue, replied as Impossible with a link to a flight. To download a flight, like a flight scanner. And they got into this like banter about the different ways he could imagine being here. So people do naturally try and fulfill wishes in obscure ways.
So we hope that he watches the podcast. And certainly Lily and I hope that all of you will join Impossible and even if not, engage in the discipline of gratitude. Thank you all so much for being here this evening. Thanks again to the Apple Store, and let's keep dreaming. Thank you very much.